This is Infants on Thrones, the philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Quorum.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, and today we have a conversation between myself, Tom, Matt, and our special guest, Bill Reel, a faithful, active Mormon who runs the Mormon Discussions podcast, and recently did an episode on spiritual abuse. Now, a video version of this discussion is available on our Patreon page, along with a bunch of other Patreon-only content, so go check us out on Patreon. But now, sit back and listen to Bill talk about the spiritual abuse he is experiencing at church, why he's choosing to stick around anyway, and why Matt thinks that it's all a bunch... Well, look, you can hear what Matt thinks about all this for yourselves. Enjoy. All right. So, Bill, let's start just telling us your story. You know, so I listened to the spiritual abuse. I think we all did. Matt and Tom, you listened to that episode, right?
Yeah.
And like I was so moved by it, like really emotionally moved. My emotions totally went out, and I cried with you while you were just emoting and struggling. And it was, you know, it took me back to, I don't know, however long ago it was when I was the one that was sitting in elders quorum and hearing people say things. You know, for me, it was kind of like, I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for the Book of Mormon. Or I don't know where I'd be, you know, suggesting that there'd be like these crack addicts or something like this. Right. And I would say, well, look, I've lived in Japan and they aren't even Christian. They don't even have the Bible. And they're pretty awesome. They're pretty moral people generally, you know. And so it's those kind of like little narratives that I was always pushing back on. And it wasn't really appreciated. And it seems like that's what you're bumping up against. And I wanted to talk with you anyway before. I mean, we chatted a little bit at Sunstone last year and talked about doing something together at some point. But I don't know, it's kind of coming at an interesting time. So maybe tell us a little bit, like you mentioned your conversion. Like how old were you when you joined the church?
So this is kind of a joke that you asked that, because in every one of my podcast episodes, I somehow get into the habit of saying that I joined the church as a 17-year-old.
Okay. So
my mom grows up a Baptist. She's completely uninvolved, though. Her life is very traumatic. She ends up in foster care out in California, and then comes back to Ohio and lives again with her mother. Just a very, I guess, dysfunctional home, although my grandmother, I can't say a bad word about her. She was just awesome to me and to my brother. My dad grew up in a home where he was had a really tough dad who kind of was abusive at times, drank a lot. Was kind of tough on his wife, my dad's mother. And my parents weren't real religious. And the only thing I can remember from my childhood is we had this really big family Bible. My parents were probably given it as a wedding gift. And it sat on a shelf. And I remember just like looking through it at some of the pictures. You know, Eve was half naked in the picture. So that was kind of cool for a 12-year-old. Right. So other than like peeking at like this Bible they had in their home, like we didn't go to church other than a wedding or a funeral here or there. And when I turned 17, I met this young lady. I took a job at McDonald's working fast food and met this young lady that worked there. And we start dating, and her dad kind of wraps his arm around me and takes me to church and does the good member missionary thing. And the missionaries start teaching me the discussions. And from the very beginning, like Mormonism picked me up off this path of not going the right direction and set me back down in this whole new life. I was selling drugs. I was using drugs. I started drinking when I was by the age of 12. I started using marijuana by the age of 14. And by the age of 16, I started selling it myself. And not that I was some, big major thug drug dealer.
Do you want to play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend.
But enough that I was just going down the wrong path. And Mormonism really, it fixed all that. And it gave me purpose. It gave me a chance to learn public speaking and leadership skills, and to be in charge of things and to have responsibilities. And it was the greatest thing in the world for me as a 17-year-old. And I took the church uber seriously. while taking the discussions with the missionaries, I read Fawn Brody's No Man Knows My History by accident, and immediately thrown into the mix of controversial issues and reading Farms and Fair Mormon and Book of Mormon Answer Man, and just really like taking pride in like, I'm going to know my Mormonism inside and out.
Yeah.
And so by the time I'm in the church a year, I'm the guy that in the entire stake that the missionaries want to come get and take to the investigator's house because they've got tough questions.
Yeah.
So, my man, the church was incredible early on. It was the greatest thing in the world for a 17-year-old kid who had no purpose in his life.
And what was your parents' reaction to it? Did they follow you in?
No. So I'm the only member in my family. My mom kind of kicked me out of the house after I joined the church. And
she was okay with the drug dealing, but once you became a Mormon.
Well, we kept a lot of good secrets from mom. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
And so she didn't know a lot of the stuff was going on. But her main issue was when you jump into Mormonism, you're both feet in and you're busy and you're doing things. And if your parents aren't in the church, like all of a sudden you're spending multiple nights a week doing other things for the church, showing up for Wednesday night mutual and going to help this couple move in and going to help this other couple move out and going home teaching and doing all these other things that your parents kind of sense like, oh, we kind of lost him. He's doing something other than spending time with us.
I guess we failed.
And I think that really got my mom irritated. And then to top it off, my wife, my fiance and I, we got married in the Washington, D.C. temple. And it makes so much sense when you're both feet in. It just makes so much sense. But we got married in the temple, and I'm trying to explain to my mother why she can't go. And it makes perfect sense to me then. Of course, it's a mess now trying to rationalize how that all works out. But I tell my mom, you can't go, but you could stay outside, right? You could be out in the front and just be happy for us. Mm-hmm. And that just broke my mother's heart. And she was really frustrated with me and my wife until my wife got pregnant with our first child. And then suddenly everything got really good again.
Like I can tell that the church has meant a lot to you over the years. And so I wanted to start with your conversion. Then you also had a lot of callings. You were a bishop at some point.
Yeah. So my very first calling, I'm a week into the church and they call me as the assistant ward mission leader. And I do that for like 6 months. And then I'm called as a secretary in the elders quorum, and I'm there for 6 months. And then after that, I'm a counselor in the elders quorum presidency, and I'm there for a year. And then a year after that, I'm the elders quorum president. I'm in the young men's presidency.
Wait, I'm confused. This was after did you serve a mission?
I did not serve a mission.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
So this was immediately after baptism. Mm-hmm. I had a good bishop who took me into his office, asked me if I wanted to serve a mission, said the ward would support me knowing I was a convert and had no time to really put funds together. And I was still kind of like, I don't know. Do I want to do that? What is that? What is a mission? And so I turned it down, and he never came back and pushed it. But I'll add too, as we get more into my story, you'll realize like I'm fully aware of the messiness of Mormonism. And I still think if I could go back in time, I would serve a mission. Like that's something I wish I would have done. I regret.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask if that was a regret.
It is.
And did that then spur you on to be even more diligent in your service that you hadn't served that? Did it feel like you were kind of deficient? You had to make up for it in other areas?
No, I don't think that had an impact at all. I was both feet in from the second I got an answer to a prayer and felt like Mormonism was the thing I needed to do. And being both feet in and a convert in this small ward out in the mission field and serving in leadership calling after leadership calling. I mean, I was called into a bishopric at age 27. And then by the age of 29, I'm the bishop of the ward that I converted to. And if you can imagine, like my street cred scale is like sky high. Like I'm the guy who joins as a teenager and totally takes the thing seriously.
Minus 15 for being a convert.
Minus 15 points for being a convert. You know, that's because it only seems fair that Mormons with a decade or two of their formative years being Mormon might have 15% more credibility than you as a convert. Or as you put it, they have all the cred and you have zero.
I find your lack of
cred
disturbing.
So close.
Yeah, but in this ward, everybody's converts.
Yeah.
Right? There are very few lifelong members. Very few BICs.
Yeah.
BICs, yeah.
So what were some of the doctrinal things that you liked about the church? So you talked about the community welcoming you in and kind of putting you on the right path, but were there certain things that like plan of salvation or?
Sure. The theological arrogance of Mormonism.
Something incredible. I'll do something incredible.
You liked that?
Oh, I loved it. Right? I'm
Do you still?
Oh, yes, but for a whole lot of other reasons.
Okay.
I want to be the Mormon who changed all of mankind. My best friend.
Right, because it gives you good fodder for conversation and these highlighted quotes of just the silly things we used to express certitude on.
Yeah.
But the idea that there's these theological certainties that Mormonism expresses left and right. We know whether cremation is good or bad. We know whether birth control is good or bad. We know whether playing cards and going to the circus is good or bad, because you can pull off Mormon doctrine off the shelf and open up the book, and you can find the answer to every single question that's ever been posed in the history of mankind. And in that time period, if you go back to the 80s, and of course that's before my time, but that's where Mormon doctrine comes out of and really thrives, is kind of in those 80s when I think it's published in 69 and really takes off in the 80s when it goes through the second and third edition. It's that arrogance of theology that is really Mormonism's strong point and what captures everybody.
I'll do something incredible that blows God's freaking mind.
Today, it's the absolute toothpick that everything's just hinging on and falling apart on. But at that moment, like that certainty of Joseph Fielding Smith, telling you that no matter what the scientists say, the Earth is 6,000 years old and dinosaurs come from other planets and Cain is still walking the earth but looks like Bigfoot. I mean, all of those things made Mormonism so much fun as a 17-year-old kid who just wants some feeling of certainty in this world of chaos.
And did you like lording that theological arrogance over the non-members?
Oh, I loved, and with the members.
And with the members that didn't know.
I loved being the only guy around who knew what a seer stone was.
Yeah.
I loved being the only guy around who knew these deeper doctrines that took hard work to kind of discover and find out. Like, I put my due diligence in and I knew those things. I knew the secrets of Mormonism. And so I was in some arrogant way, I was better than everybody else because
of bulletproof.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but you had all this stuff, you had all this knowledge or whatever, but I mean, didn't anything get put on the proverbial shelf for you where you're like, okay, that's a little problematic, but I'll address that at some point? Did you ever have those?
So in college, I'm in college at Bowling Green State University.
Been there.
I'm there to be a teacher, but I eventually drop out because I'm just not cut out for school. And every time there wasn't a class, I'd head over to the computer center and I would study various facets of Mormonism, and I would come across these conundrums, but I was looking for them. I wanted a conundrum. And then I would take the conundrum and I'd run over to Fair Mormon or Farms or Book of Mormon Answer Man, and then they would give me this, apologetic mental gymnastic. And when you're the only guy who knows the problems and you're the only guy who knows the mental gymnastic answer, and you're young and naive in terms of like this cognitive development that your brain has not gone through yet, like, you accept these simple answers that don't work. You accept them as like these great treasures because you're the only guy who knows them. You're the only guy who can put those puzzle pieces together.
That sounds like arrogance.
It is. Oh, it's absolutely arrogance.
Well, okay,
right.
but I mean, some of those answers, mental gymnastic answers is a good way of putting it, but some of them are just, I mean, even for me, when I was with, messing around with apologetics, I remember having real problems with some of the answers that they had. And I was like, this is the best that they could come up with. I mean, I don't think it's even under dispute. Like the Book of Abraham, the answers that they provide there are really, really bad. The catalytic theory and the missing scroll theory. I mean, they're both, they hammer them every single time. And it just, neither one of them really hold any water, at least in my opinion.
But try to pretend being a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who's really like looked at in the ward as being like the success story. And the missionaries call you up and say, hey, we've got this couple, they're investigating the church, but their minister is giving them these issues and they've got these deep questions. And you walk into the house and you're like, there's this missing scroll. And this missing scroll solves everything. like there's this arrogance that comes along with knowing that mental gymnastic answer that allows you to put it forth and have confidence in it.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's a good ego-stroked moment. I'll give you
It's
that.
either that or you were way smarter than I was, because I just the simple answers worked for me early on. It wasn't till halfway through serving as a bishop that, and again, my shelf had always had things on it, and that shelf kept getting heavier. But it was halfway through being a bishop that shelf just completely collapsed.
Okay, so give one or two of the items that was on that shelf, like when you started, whether you were started being a bishop or while you were being a bishop, things that you were like, ooh, I don't know if I want to address that right now or maybe later. Or...
So I knew all the criticisms. I didn't know the depth of them. So for the first time in my decade in the church, I'm actually wanting to learn what the Kirtland Egyptian papers are, and what the facsimiles are, and what Egyptologists have to say about it, not just what we're spitting out. And so it's the moment you dive into the depths of those issues. The Book of Abraham was a serious one. Another one was more surface level. It was kind of coming to grips with why the average member doesn't know this stuff. And when I was younger, the explanation for me was that the members just weren't studious enough. Like I was more studious than they were. I was putting the hard work in. And so I would get these answers, which are incredibly, these depths of these things in the depths of Mormonism. And I would blame it like the average member just isn't reading, shame on them. And it's not until halfway into my bishop, being a bishop, that I start to put together that the mechanisms are in place. The cultural behaviors that we have are set up to keep us from having these conversations and to keep us from feeling encouraged to dive into this stuff. And so for me, it was really kind of coming to a realization that we really should have been talking about these things, and the average member should have been encouraged to study more and to understand this, and it didn't happen. And where does that accountability fall? And that was a big chunk of why my shelf fell down.
Why do you say should? Like what would you see would be the benefit of the average member being exposed to these things that the church has tried to keep? Because they're trying to maintain faith and keep away doubt. And
Right.
And you're saying that being exposed to the things that would cause them to doubt would be something that's beneficial to them?
Wouldn't it give them a little more resilience, like you said, Glenn, where you start to feel like, hey, I've got answers for this, this, and this. So even if they're not good answers.
I would simply say whether somebody stays in Mormonism or not, people have a right to make decisions that are going to have them sacrificing their time, resources, and energy, their human capital. Like, people have a right to be informed as they make those decisions. And it's obvious what we do as a church when we send missionaries into somebody's home. There's an obvious difference between the things we like to tell people and the things we don't want to tell people. So for instance, we love to tell people about Joseph Smith's leg surgery as a kid, right? We love to tell that story. We never mention his dad was a severe alcoholic, which is probably why he doesn't want to touch the drink during that surgery. We also don't want to tell people about treasure digging and seer stones, which has a much larger impact on his calling as a prophet, quote unquote, than a leg surgery does. And yet what we leave out and what we leave in, it's pretty obvious we don't want to touch certain things. And I think the average couple who's having two missionaries come into their home and trying to convince them from leaving their Methodist congregation and join Mormonism, they have a right to know the details. They have a right to know the story and to make an informed decision. Whether that grows the church or people leave the church, that part doesn't matter to me. Like truth matters, and I want people to have information and to make decisions based on that information.
That's a good answer, man. But can you also elaborate? Because I have listened to more than one episode, Glenn.
Tom, you're so great.
I-
Why don't you go over to your sink right now?
But I also know, Bill, that the LGBT issues have been huge for you. At least, I mean, that's what I've perceived by listening to some of your episodes. And that's when you became a little more outspoken, that I recall, because that, I don't know if that hit a little too close to home for you, or if that just became something like that hit your heart and you like, this is so wrong, whether it was the Prop 8 thing or the November policy thing. But that to me is when I started to think that, wow, Bill he's getting real passionate about this. There's something hitting him real hard about this.
So first off, know throughout this interview, you guys can ask anything. Like I love questions, and I love to be vulnerable to those questions. And the other thing I'm kind of hoping, I know from listening to you guys' episodes, you guys do a lot of edits with sound effects. I'm hoping you guys can take some of the regular words I say and like beep them out and make them sound like swear words. That would be like really cool. But,
or you could just say the swear words. But
well, I did that in the last episode, and I don't want to make a regular kind of thing of that.
Okay.
Yeah. Did it hurt to say?
Did it hurt?
Ass?
It seemed a little natural, Bill. Flowed pretty natural.
I'll simply say that I generally don't swear much, if at all, in my life, but sometimes that word is the only word that can capture the moment. It's the only word that can express how frustrated or hurt you are. And it's when using those words that you grab the attention of somebody, and somebody can say, ooh, like he normally doesn't swear and he's doing it today. So there's something wrong today. And I don't see an issue with that. Like sometimes I think swear words accomplish something. In terms of the LGBT,
Randy thinks that too, but then he overuses it. So they go, oh, it must be Monday.
Yeah, it's just Randy.
He saturates it. He's like a 2-year-old in the pool. He just keeps it everywhere.
In terms of the LGBT issue, when that happened, like I had reconciled my Mormonism. Like I'd taken everything, deconstructed it, taken it all apart, discarded the parts I didn't like, picked back up the parts I did, and said, okay, as long as the church is making progress, I can do this. I can be Mormon. And when that November policy came out, it literally was like a punch to the stomach. It felt like the church was looking at me and saying, I don't care how much work you've put in over the last 5 years to put this back together. We're just not going to go the right direction. And I know somebody in the church is certainly listening, but I don't want to sound like, oh, you guys are wrong. I'm just saying like that to me was personal. And there's nobody in my family that's I don't have a gay child, at least not that I know of yet. We've had some things where a couple of our kids have expressed that they think maybe they've had those kinds of feelings before, but we don't have like a kid who's saying like, I'm gay. I don't have a gay brother or sister. I don't have anybody in my immediate or even close extended family who has that on their plate. But for some reason, like I'm just tired of people being marginalized, and I'm tired of big, powerful institutions holding on to rhetoric from years ago because they have to defend it now because they've said it so many times, and it allows them to kind of keep the general masses comfortable. And so they perpetuate these ideas and these stories and these narratives when the reality is like, what is scripture? And we'll get into that. I know, Glenn, you wrote that down, but like, is scripture literal? And if it isn't, if it's just fables and myths made up to help us develop an identity as a culture, then to use it as a hammer to beat people over the head with and cause some people to lose their lives, it just got to the point it was so heavy for me. And I literally spent 2 or 3 weeks just like in complete depression because I can't deal with the fact that my religion is causing someone to take their life. Like that hurts.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that. And nobody wants to stand up and say like, yeah, we have a problem here and we're working on it. Instead, that's a revelation and nobody can criticize it. Nobody can complain. And meanwhile, young kids are taking their lives. And I can't get comfortable with that. I can't be okay with that.
Well, I do want to just commend you, Bill, that you just seem to be naturally empathetic to, the gay community. And for whatever reason that you kind of jump to the front lines to be an ally for them, I think it's really commendable. So I just wanted to mention that.
I appreciate that. Somebody has to stand up, right? If we all just give deference to our leaders and criticism is wrong even if it's true, and we all just hold to that old mentality, then nobody stands up for these kids and says something is wrong here. This has to end. This has to stop. And I'm whatever it means. If it means that they come after me and at some point I'm not a member of the church anymore, so be it. But somebody has to stand up and say this isn't okay.
Something incredible.
Yeah, I keep coming back to this trope of mine, which is, yeah, do it outside the church. If it's that bad, if they're really doing that much damage, I think my criticism, the mama dragons and now the daddy dragons, I guess they started, and is be a real dad, be a real mom by removing your kid from the church. And I think you marginalize them more in those kids' life by having them have as little influence as you can. Now, this comes from, for me, a place that's very personal is, I had to make sure my kid was as healthy as possible. And we did that before we knew he was gay, but it has been the greatest happy coincidence that we could ever experience, that he happened to be gay and that we left the church before that all happened. And so Mormonism, the greatest gift I could give my son is for Mormonism to be as irrelevant in his life as possible. And so I struggle hearing what you're saying, Bill, and I'm not, I commend you for what you're doing and what you're saying, because I certainly agree with it, but I guess I have a tough time saying, I guess, giving too much credit when I see the answer is if it's that problematic, the real answer is to leave and make them impotent in the lives of people. And until that happens, they will continue to rain havoc on these kids, especially that are marginalized, and any individual who's doesn't fit the program.
Right. So the pushback I would give you on that, and I agree with you 100%. I've taught my children, my wife and I have taught our children to be critical thinkers, to not accept things the way they are. And my kids are very much LGBT allies, and the policy bothered them without me even having to tell them where I stood. But here's my struggle. You go to church on Sunday and there's these people here and then there are kids there. And these kids have deep testimonies of this religion, right? They're fully in. They're both feet in, and they are committed that Mormonism is the true church.
Which kids are you talking about, Bill?
Just the other kids at the ward.
Oh, not your kids specifically,
not my
just
kids.
Kids in the ward.
Just kids in general.
Yeah.
And so these kids are full in. They're both feet in. They're full believers, and some of them are gay. And I'm trying to picture being a gay kid whose parents are really Orthodox, who he himself or herself are real, like full TBM, true blue believing members. And now they've got this contradiction or paradox in their life. And they're trying to decide like how they handle that, because in their mind, the church is true and God is not happy with them. And if somebody doesn't stay and be a healthy voice for the believing kids, like that's so much more hurt and harm for that kid. Like you could walk away and your family will be healthier, but that believing kid has one less positive voice in his world saying like you don't have to accept this the way this looks to you right now.
Yeah, I've heard the argument before. It's not that I haven't heard that or I haven't considered that. I'm very good friends with Meg Abhow, and we go around and around and around on this all the time. I guess I reject that. It sounds good. I think it's a good answer. I don't think it's a realistic one. I don't think people who stay are really having the influence on those believing kids who happen to be gay. I think you overstate the positive impact that will have on those kids. I feel very, very strongly that if anything, you being in provides salve to the church. It provides cover for the church, not to these kids. That the only answer for any of these kids that are believing is to give them an alternative, which is the only alternative, if you're going to be gay, which is you must leave the church as quickly as possible in order to be as healthy as possible. Because the other problem with that, the thing that I don't know that you're considering, is the longer these kids stay in the church, the more residual trauma they will continue to experience when they will inevitably get out of the church. Hopefully they get out of the church, because if they don't get out of the church, it may result in a tragic death or something, even, something else that is bad. So I don't accept that what you've offered is really practical and is really having the impact on a larger scale that we give lip service to, and that the mama dragons give lip service to. Now, I'm sure there's anecdotes out there we can say that kid, well, maybe, but let's look at what that kid is in 10 years and in 20 years. So it's really hard to measure. So I hope you're right. I don't think you are.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that the longer I'm in this thing, the more I realize that the change I want is either way further off in the distance than I thought it would be, or it's maybe not even coming at all. And so coming to grips with that certainly has this kind of conversation being really fluid in my mind. Like I've shifted over the last 3 months on this issue. And so I fully value and honor your perspective. And I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And again, I could share some of those anecdotal stories. I would simply say some of these kids are full in and they're not going to leave the church. And they think that their life and who they are is completely a contradiction to what God teaches.
And I hear that, Bill, and I guess I'm starting to get worked up now. So I want to acknowledge that, and I want to because that's right. And the problem is the church piece. The problem is the religious piece. And there's no way to bridge that if they're full in. And so I come back to the longer they stay in, the more these kids that are experiencing that, the more trauma they're going to experience in the long run. And you're right. If you can't convince them, or if I can't convince them that the church is something other than what they want it to be or need it to be or have been taught it's going to be, they are going to have that conflict. They're going to have that angst, and no amount of stroking them and saying, but it's okay, but you cannot reconcile that, and other people cannot reconcile it. My God. One of the founding Mormon Dragons kids fucking killed himself.
Right.
He had all the resources in the world. He had every lip service that you're talking about. He had the kids, he had affirmation, he had the mom and the dad and the brother and the sister and the friends and all these people, and he fucking killed himself. Now I know there are other factors. It's not just a one-to-one. Well, there's the church, there's the gay, and therefore there's other factors out there. Life's complicated for everyone. I'm not suggesting it's not, but if those resources couldn't save that kid, I don't know. I don't think that's an answer, or that's. I don't think that's the best answer for these kids. I think we have to have another option. And too often with this, and this has been my complaint recently, is it feels in this tiny little myopic world that we have of either Mormonism or just a degree affirmative ex-Mormonism, there's really not a whole lot of paths. There's not a whole lot of options. There's the accepted. It's kind of the same way that I think people complain about the regressive left. There's a program, and there are talking points, and you have to accept these talking points as being right or good because we've accepted them as so. And this is one of them that I feel very, very strongly about. This is one of them where I think more and more people need to at least hope that you, the Mama Dragons, the other people that take the position that you do of staying in, hope they do well, but that more people need to stand up and say that may not be a viable option for even most. I hope it's an option for some, and I hope it is a net negative, or it's a net positive rather. I don't know that it is.
And all I can say to that, I honor where you're coming from, and I feel those feelings too. The best way for me to phrase it is I feel truly called to work and help those on the fringes, those who are marginalized within our faith. And I truly feel like I have more of an impact inside than I would ever have outside. Right. And I'm always weighing like this back and forth. Is it really good? Am I really doing good? Is there really good happening here? I don't know. I only know like I feel called to like help those on the margins of our religion. And my impression is that I'm doing more good on the inside of that edge than I would do on the outside of that edge.
Well, and that kind of leads to that episode that kind of spurred this discussion, the kind of the spiritual trauma. Is that what you titled the episode?
Yeah, spiritual trauma of Mormonism,
where you go into great depth about the toll that being in or kind of being a champion for whether it's closeted doubters or LGBT youth or whatever, the toll that it's taken on you. Because that's where my heart broke for you, Bill. Honestly, I was just like, you're fighting a fight that I don't even know how to say it. It's like it's a really commendable, and I totally want to throw all of my support and love behind you. But I also it's like I want to tell you, get out of there, dude. The boat's taking on water.
See, and I'm actually rooting for Bill to succeed because I'd love to see somebody do it. I completely empathize with where you're coming from, Bill, because there were times where I wanted to do that. It wasn't really directed at the LGBT issue, but just being there to help break some of the ties that the church has in people's life. And, so I don't remember if you said something like this in that episode or if it was just something that I was thinking as I was listening to it, but I was picturing baby steps and, this idea. Oh, I know what Tom is when we were talking with Wendy. That's what it was when we were talking with Wendy Perry, and like these baby steps. Like, oh, look, this is progress. The church is going in the right direction. And I think, okay, well, there's baby steps, but eventually there's a wall, and you're going to hit that wall, and you're not getting past that wall. And that wall, in most cases, is literal belief in X, Y, or Z, whether it's the Book of Mormon or Joseph Smith
or the one
prophets
church,
or like all of these different things. And once you, whether you're leading somebody or you're watching them take these steps towards it, that wall isn't going to be passed with baby steps. And, so what I'm hearing from Matt is saying, you got to get on the other side of that wall as quickly as possible because it's not safe inside. And what you're saying, Bill, is I feel like I need to do something for the people that are inside because I love them and that's where I am and I want to try and make this work. So I'm rooting for you to be successful with this. And I've got my doubts that it will be, but I hope I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. So that's where I'm coming from with this.
And let me throw out, and this will sound crazy, and let me say this as a preface. For those whom Mormonism is just unhealthy for, like, I absolutely validate, step away, like walk away from it. If it's hurting you or hurting those you love, like walk away. Now, taking that segment off to the side and me not speaking to them, let me throw out the idea that when things are unhealthy, when your morality butts heads with an institution or a culture, that those are the moments where real growth happens. I mean, I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, but the scales would have never fallen from my eyes had I not come face to face with the contradictions and unhealthiness of Mormonism. And so on some level, like, again, I'm willing to have the conversation about how unhealthy a group Mormonism is and the other kinds of unhealthy high demand religions that are out there. And whether it's worth staying in this one or worth staying in those other ones. But what I would say is that in some ways, I'm really thankful for the negative side of Mormonism because it's caused me to recognize my own homophobia, my own racism, my own indifference to those who are picked on and bullied in our culture, our society, and in our religion. And in some ways, I could make the argument that it's the unhealthiness of Mormonism that makes it true and living for me, if that makes sense. Like, if Mormonism would have been beautiful and all the pieces would have stayed put together, I would still be this naive person who's boasting of just crazy stuff. And it's only in Mormonism being flawed and unhealthy and causing hurt and trauma that I've woken up. And I'm alive. I'm okay.
Mormonism also is what put you in that unhealthy, arrogant place that you just talked about.
But that's when it fit together really good. That's when it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? When it was beautiful.
But you don't see it as beautiful now. I'm sorry.
You're good. That's good. I still see Mormonism as having beautiful things to it. I'm just no longer needing.
No, what I mean is that person that you were that was so confident in these, things that you just spoke about that version of you, however many years ago,
right?
As being, you're grateful that you're not that person anymore, right?
Right.
And that Mormonism, like the conflicts in Mormonism, have made you not that person anymore that Mormonism initially made you.
Right. That me seeing the shadows of our faith is what has caused me to improve as a human being.
Yeah.
Right. And so in some ways it's the unhealthiness of any religion or any society that causes us to wake up, causes us to open our eyes and say, enough is enough. I'm not going to hold that ground anymore. And I think sometimes we have to see those shadows and come face to face with them for us to be alive.
This institution is so committed to maintaining that wall that keeps people in, though. Yeah.
Is it working?
Is it working?
Is it working?
Is Mormonism working, and what the leaders are doing to demonize, LGBT communities? Is it working?
Are the numbers of people waking up and saying enough is enough? I'm just not going to buy into this hook, line, and sinker.
So that's something I don't know, because I'm so detached from the church right now. I'm not talking with people on Sunday who are going to church with me who are also in a similar situation. Is that what you're saying? Like, are you experiencing this, that people that you go to church with are woke in the sense that the brethren are wrong about things like the November policy change, that you're hearing that?
I think it's still a small number, but I think that number is growing. I've got a gentleman who 5 years ago, he was the only guy in his ward who was asking tough questions and willing to put his foot down and say, I'm just not going to hold that ground. And today there are 5 or 6 families in that ward who are either completely out or they're asking those questions and putting their foot down. I know in my own
What do you mean
ward,
when you say completely out?
Like just left the church.
Okay,
Like
but they're not still in the church, that are like they're making it work, even though they don't believe in
some of that 5 or 6 are, and some of them have just completely walked away. And I'm saying that number is growing. Like more and more people are sensing the paradoxes that exist between our culture and our religion. And that number is growing of people who are waking up and saying, I'm just not going to hold the same ground that this institution holds. And so you've got Jana Reese, who just released a study last week, I think it was in the Salt Lake Tribune, that said that millennials are as inactive as they've ever been. Like the younger generation in the church is walking away in greater numbers. You had the leak that Mormon Leaks had with the meeting with the general authorities, where they said, I think it was 73% of all of our youth are inactive by the age of 21 now. I just think that in developed countries where information is in your face and people get to rub shoulders with those of other cultures and skin colors and sexual preferences, that we begin to sense like human beings are just human beings. And the more we want to hold this old ground that we know what happened in the premortal life and we know why people are in the station they're in today, like that just becomes nonsense.
So are you saying that people leaving the church is a good thing? Like I'm a little confused. This is evidence that people are waking up and they're leaving the church, and this is a really good thing, that the conflict is driving people out of the church.
Whether somebody leaves or stays, I think that's a personal decision. I don't know if that's good or bad. It depends on from situation to situation. Sure. What I'm saying though is that people letting go of looking outside themselves for authorities and having their own inner authority inside themselves and saying, like, I'm going to decide inside me.
We're going to do this on
what
my
is
terms.
right. What is right
Yeah.
and what is wrong, and I'm going to hold that ground.
Yeah.
That number of people is increasing. And
So whether so whether people are staying in the church or leaving, they're saying, I'm going to do this on my terms. And so in that sense, they're cutting themselves off from the sense of authority or stewardship that a leader has over them. They're saying, no, I'm going to take responsibility for myself.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. A larger and larger percentage of people are not going to just put blind trust in the institution any longer. Like, they have to see things be reasonable and rational, and they're asking themselves these tough questions. And again, I think it's still a small number, but I think that number is growing. More and more people are waking up.
Now I'm starting to think about different sections where I would like bleep out what you're saying. So I'm like already way ahead in the editing thing going, oh, more and more people are, you know.
Yeah,
play
please
around with that.
do that. Let's make me sound like a vulgar sailor. Make me sound like Randy.
Yeah. Okay. How you doing, Matt?
You're
you
on
doing all
mute.
right?
I'm on mute. I'm good.
Okay.
So if you don't mind just elaborating a little bit more, Bill, about the toll, because honestly, when I finished that episode, I'm like, man, where's he going to be now? And I don't think you've released an episode with you in it since then. I haven't checked, but hell, man, how have you been? You okay?
No, yeah, thank you for asking. I think I'm okay. One of the things I've always noticed is that I feel like a tough guy. I feel like the guy who can be at the front lines of this, and I'll bear the brunt of these shots coming across the bow, and I'll kind of save others behind me. And so that people who follow, years down the road, that this path might be just a little softer. And what I noticed in the last month or so is my body telling me that I'm experiencing trauma. I'm experiencing anxiety. I'm experiencing tension that I'd never felt before. And I've been swimming in this stuff for 4 or 5, 6 years, and to some extent, maybe even longer than that. And it's only in the last month that my body's just saying, like, ooh, something's not right here, and you can't do this long term the way you're doing it. And the other thing I came to grips with, as I talked about in that episode, it really just hit me. It was like a light bulb coming on. The idea that in Mormonism, every place we turn, the institution, when you don't fit the mold, it tells your story. And whether you're a Lamanite, whether you're a woman who doesn't want to spend her life as a housewife raising kids, whether you're Thomas Marsh because they want to tell you leftover milk and strippings, whether you're Simon's Ryder who they want to say you left because your name was spelled wrong. No matter where you turn in Mormonism, the moment you're not in the tribe in some way, the institution tells your story, that you're less than in some way, that you didn't work hard enough, that somehow those who still fit the mold are doing it the right way, and somehow you've lost your way. And I just look at that kind of mechanism, and just to be frank, I find it now, and again, it's just I've only come to realize this in the last few weeks, that is abuse. That's abusive. When you don't let someone tell their story, and you tell it for them, and you tell it inaccurately, like you are doing like deep trauma to that person. And at every turn in Mormonism, we do that. And it got to the point where my body said enough is enough. And I have to kind of put my foot down and just say, like, from now on, nobody gets to tell my story. I'm telling it. And that's kind of what's happened.
You damn the consequences, right?
Right. If it means I have to leave or they have to remove me because I'm just not allowed to tell my story and they have to be allowed to tell my story, then so be it. Then what does that say? Like I can't do that anyway. So sooner or later I'm out anyway. So this institution has to decide if we're going to honor people that go out or who step back, if we're going to honor them as much as the people who come in, right? Because doubts are so bad when you're a member of the church and you're doubting the church. But doubts, for some reason, even though we say like doubts are awful, like questions are good, but doubts are horrible, yet when missionaries go into that Catholic family's home, in essence, they're asking them to doubt their Catholicism, right? When we go into anybody's house as a missionary and we teach them, we're asking them to doubt their current circumstances are sufficient to bring them back to God. Like the only time we say doubts are bad is when it's a religious leader within the church that you're doubting. That's the only time doubts are bad. And so we have to walk away from that and say, look, enough's enough. People are people. Everybody's on their own journey. Whether they're coming into the church or whether they're going out, let's honor that. Let's let them tell their own story. They're on a spiritual journey one way or the other, and let's not automatically assume that this is some negative for them.
But I totally agree with what you're saying, but there's elements of your story or my story or Glenn's or Matt's story that's very troublesome for people, especially if you're a believer. And those elements include like problematic issues with the doctrine or church or even the policy or anything like that. And I think that's where people, at least with believers, they kind of get a little, hesitant, like, okay, we don't mind hearing your story, but you're already putting more items on my shelf. And that's why I think some of them are like, I don't want to hear your story, Bill, because now it's making me feel like I need to either doubt the church or doubt myself or whatever. Does that make sense?
Sure, but you see the social pressure in a Sunday school class that even prevents you from telling your story, right? Something gets said, and you can just sense the aura in the room that, wow, this isn't even a safe space to say that. And at the exact same time, 5 or 6 people in that class are raising their hand and telling the entire class why somebody's left, or why this happened to so-and-so, or why God, for some reason, gave this person a challenge at this moment. We used to teach that handicapped kids were less valiant in the premortal life, right? We taught that black people were less valiant. We taught that we tell people that Thomas Marsh left over milk and strippings, but we negate to tell anybody that 6 months earlier, Joseph Smith was sealed to his third plural wife, Lucinda Harris, who is the woman that Mrs. Marsh is having the argument with. So try to imagine sending an appeal. You're Thomas Marsh, you don't know any better. You send an appeal to the first presidency. Do you expect Joseph Smith to side against his third plural wife that nobody knows about? What's the chances of that? But we don't tell that part of the story. And so the point has come where like enough's enough. We can't just tell partial stories anymore. We got to lay it out there and say, like, people leave over real reasons. People have real struggles with church history. And for most of them, they've read more than you have. And again, I wouldn't say that right bluntly in a Sunday school class. I would choose my words carefully. But from here on out, when we have a conversation about why people leave, I'm going to make it clear in my words that their reasons are valid, and that these aren't just crazy people who stop reading their scriptures and stop praying, that in many instances, these people begged and pleaded for some way to stay. They wanted it to work. They were trying to make it work. And for whatever reason, Mormonism had so many paradoxes and contradictions, they just simply couldn't. And like, let's honor their story as they walk away or step back. And I get it. You can't be blunt. You couldn't say that in a Sunday school class. I'd get thrown out. I'd be gone in 3 days, right?
So one of the ideas that I had when you asked me for like some bullet points and some talking points, I think we're kind of getting to that. The last one that I had was spiritual abuse versus spiritual nourishment. And I kind of made up that term spiritual nourishment because I don't really even know what it means. And so I've been listening to what you've been saying here about spiritual abuse as being somebody co-opting your narrative and not accepting your story and your reasons for, stated reasons for whatever. Would nourishment be the opposite of that? Is that a solution to you? And do you think that will actually happen? That the church, or that at least enough people in the church, the leadership in the church, will put an end to the Thomas Marsh type stories that demonize the apostates and say, you know what, they're good people, we should love them, which they do say that, but then they turn around and they say the other things too. We should love them back into the church. You know,
Right.
I mean, do you expect that's going to, or is that what you're aiming for? I don't know. Is that even the antidote?
My hope would be that we can get to a place where we stop seeing growth as backsliding and falling off the path. That we start seeing people who begin to develop their inner authority, people who begin to not see in black and white ways, like that to be accepted as positive and growth, whatever it leads to. It's going to lead some out of the church. It's going to lead some to be simply more nuanced believers. But we have to stop teaching our adult Sunday school in a primary fashion. We have to start like explaining to people like life is full of paradoxes. Life is full of contradictions. Life is full of messy details. And let's begin to kind of like stop saying it's either or, us versus them. And let's recognize that when people begin to develop that inner authority, when they begin to stop like just resting their beliefs on outside of themselves, like that's positive. And most religions, and especially fundamentalist religions, don't do so well with that. Anytime someone begins to spiritually develop or cognitively develop, we tend to see that as apostasy. And I hope, again, I don't know whether we get there or not. I'm willing to fight for it, but I hope we get to a day that growth is seen for what it is. And that as people begin to develop and get richer in the way they think of the world, that we like honor that. That's my hope.
That would be awesome. I don't think that the church can do it.
Probably not in the next 20 years or 50 years, or maybe not even the next 200.
Are there examples of any churches that do that?
So look at Catholicism, for instance, right? Brutal church, whatever, 1,000 years ago.
Sorry, let me interrupt real quick.
Please.
So, but if that's the case, then what's the point? Sounds futile. If we agree.
The debate, I guess.
Why?
Sure, the debate maybe you're having is like, do we burn this thing to the ground or do we try to make it healthier? And I just don't think Mormonism is going to disappear.
Well,
I mean,
but there's the third option of you just walk away and you make it irrelevant to you and to your family members. You're at least in your kids.
Sure, but if I'm just telling you, I'm in my ward and I'm raising my voice and I'm making comments, and I feel like it makes a difference. Is it small? Sure. Is it just a little bit? Yeah, but if all the people like me walk out, like we become more fundamentalist, we become more unhealthy.
You think so? No. You think you become unhealthy if you leave?
Not me. I'm talking about the church.
Does.
Oh, the church.
Yeah,
the church.
If all the Bill Reals walk away, the church becomes more rigid and fundamentalist.
But I think that's kind of what the church is anyway. I mean,
right. I feel so. What you just said there, Bill, is I laugh because I feel like I just got into a DeLorean and went back in time 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt when I listened to your recording. I went through this arc of
I sit and watch the children play, doing things I used to do. They think are new. I sit and watch as tears go by.
Wow. Yeah, welcome to my life 10 years ago. Welcome to all these other people's lives 10 years ago. And so that's what you're saying isn't new. But the fact that you choose to stay there, I don't know that it doesn't make the church any less fundamentalist than they are. For maybe from your ward, there's a perception because you're saying it. I just have a real tough time thinking that that it doesn't make the church fundamental because you're not there, and it is so irrelevant, the number of people who are there willing to speak up, that it might as well not even exist. That's how I feel very, very, very strongly. And so I guess what I'm saying is with respect, which you know that the next thing that comes is going to be less than respectful. As I think you may be a little a little maybe a little naive as to your real impact and other people's impact. The church is the church, and the church is going to continue to be what they are. And I just reject that you being present will do anything but provide salve to the church and to provide cover for the church, because they will see, but guys like Bill, who are reasonable and smart and understand these things, are still in the church. The only thing you do is provide cover, and the only thing you do is keep other people in the church longer than they may have otherwise be, because you will be the person that will be misunderstood and held out in a way that maybe you don't want to be held. And I say this in years again of going through that process, Bill, because I have a history of being the person to be able to take the barbs for other people. That's what I used to tell myself as to why I did the job that I did, because I can take it. I can be on the front lines and take it so other people don't have to. So what you're saying is something that I've told myself, not just in work, but as it relates to Mormonism. And what I don't, what you may not appreciate, and what I'm concerned with is I don't, since given what I heard in your podcast, I'm concerned that you don't appreciate the amount the toll that will take on you and your family. And I don't know your family, how old the kids are, and those types of things. That you're going to constantly hitting your hand in a hammer. And I felt so much. I felt this both a compassion for what you were saying, because it made me tap into again that trauma that I experienced, and at the same time, you know what, Bill, fuck you for making me feel that trauma that I am more and more beyond. So the more I listen to you, or the more I interact with people like you, it's not healthy, and I don't think it's healthy for other people as well. And your podcast, your last episode, all it did, it should be a poster child for why people should leave the church sooner. Because if you're experiencing that now, shit.
No, keep going.
Sorry. If you're experiencing that now, you're going to continue to experience it. Other people are going to continue to experience it. So I guess what I'm saying is, and the more I'm on here, and I'm not saying a whole lot, I guess, other than kind of being a dick to you, Bill. So I apologize for that.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I really like you. I really like what you're saying quite a bit, and I like to listen to you. Your episode is just how fundamentally different I certainly approach things, and I just want to at least articulate that again to tell people, no, all that Bill is saying, anyone who's listening and anyone who listened to Bill, is run far, run fast. The sooner you can put distance between yourself and the church, which includes ex-Mormonism, for the love of Pete, leave ex-Mormonism, leave Mormonism. There is only trauma. There is only trauma and pain here, and you can fill it with good things. You can fill it with music and people and friends and food and drink and
food,
movies.
and,
and there is so much more time to be spent than certainly going to church or going onto the groups and to bitch about all these things. And all that I've heard today and in your podcast just reaffirms that with so much power to me, that the only thing I regret is that I didn't leave in 2007, that I left in 2012. That's the only thing I regret through all of this. And I just want to scream at anybody who you might have influence on to stay and to adopt your wrong, objectively wrong way of viewing things. I'm teasing.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
But the only thing that I cringe at is that you might have influence to make people stay who otherwise certainly can't, and think they might be built for it, and think that, well, I want to help other people too. And all you are really doing is contributing to additional trauma that people will experience. That's my fear. And I suspect that's what's more likely to happen than being a net positive when it comes to the health, emotional health of other people who are in the church. That's what I fear. That's what I fear.
I see this a little differently, Matt, because I think that the worth of a soul is great. And I think you believe that too. And you're saying that the best thing for the soul is to just get out. But the reality is that you didn't get out in 2007. It took you to 2012. And if you would have had somebody in your life like Bill Reel, maybe you would have stayed in a little bit longer, but maybe some of the trauma that you experienced would have been a little easier to deal with. I think that it's very likely that the people who listen to Bill and follow Bill that he does have influence on see tremendous value in what it is that he's providing to them. And like what you're saying is basically like all that stuff that you think is value, you're fooling yourself, just rip off the Band-Aid and get out. And if they were ready to do that, they would, but they're not. And having Bill in there.
No, I hear everything that you're saying, and I've considered that. I've weighed it and found it wanting, is what I'm saying.
I'm just offering a different opinion, which is mine. I'm not saying this is absolute truth. I'm just saying this is how I see it.
I've been thinking about that a lot. And just because some path is slightly less traumatic or is a little more healthy than the alternative, that doesn't make it healthy. So the answer is, but perhaps Bill being there, it may be a little better, and having than if nobody was there. That's possible, I suppose. But yeah, I left not as soon as I could have. I think I should have. Now, in retrospect, I know that there are ways that I could have left sooner, and that would have been recognizing exactly what Bill did and what Bill pointed out. There's real trauma here. Now, I'm not going to call it spiritual trauma, and I think this is where we err by saying that it's something unique. It's not. People experience trauma. People experience abandonment. People experience PTSD. People experience all these things that Mormons, ex-Mormons, transitioning Mormons, whatever, experience in going through this process. We by calling it something niche, I think we do a disservice to people. Well, the advice should be, you are absolutely experiencing real trauma. You need to speak to somebody. You could go to a professional, healthcare professional that can really help you understand that. You can deal with communication issues with your spouse. You can deal with. This is what I keep coming back to, and this is where I've pulled my hair out so much now, in I think realizing that is there is not just a number of better ways or just one better way. There are a lot of better ways to just approach this from a healthy way, and one of it is realizing, just again what Bill said. This is real trauma that I'm experiencing. I'm experiencing anxiety, all the things that he said. Yeah, these aren't new. People experience this over and over and over again throughout, in their life. The answer is not to go and just commiserate with everybody and try to work things out and kind of process and talk. It's to go deal with those issues, and I think it's through dealing with real healthcare providers, or go get a life coach. One of the two. You all decide which of those two are the best way to do it. But I feel very, 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 very strongly about it right now. And so and that could change, next week. I don't know. But get out and go talk to somebody and deal with your trauma. It's what I tell victims. And what I tell victims' families when I represent them, they always ask me, well, she's doing well, and we're kind of talking about, and we're doing these things, so I don't think she needs counseling. My answer to them is no, she does. They absolutely need counseling. The sooner you can get these kids into counseling, the better off they are. And it's the same thing here. If real trauma is being experienced, then we don't have the language, we don't have the background to deal with it. I think on the level, and our podcast and John's podcast and Bill's podcast and these groups, all they do is provide a counterfeit answer and a counterfeit, kind of a masking answer, help to what people are experiencing. When I'm not equipped to deal with it, Bill's not equipped with it, John's not equipped to deal with it, and these moderators and admins and all these groups in dealing with mixed faith marriages and all these things are not equipped to deal with it. People are experiencing trauma, and they need to address the trauma so that they don't experience it and realize in 7 years or in 10 years, oh my gosh, I've been masking it And I've been kind of covering and going through it, but I haven't dealt with it, because at some point people are going to deal with it head on, and it's not going to be fun. And in many ways, people are going to deal with the regret and the pain and the loss that they experienced, but they're going to experience again and again and again for every day that they didn't deal with it before. So we are actually compounding trauma. We're not helping it. We're not easing it. We're masking it, but we're delaying it. That's my strong belief as a non-healthcare professional.
Like I can't even like disagree with that. Like I've completely validated everything you're saying. My struggle is that when I look at, on one side are the victims of that trauma, on the other side are those who abuse or inflicting it or causing it, and some of it's intentional and some of it's unintentional. And throughout history, throughout society, there's always got to be somebody who stands up and tells the like tries to be somebody to like say like, this can't continue with the abuser. Somebody has to stand up and say like, there's all these other people still here. You can't keep doing this to these people. Like somebody's got to speak up. And when you look at all the, and again, I don't want to get all like philosophical here and talk about Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln and Mother Teresa and all that stuff. But throughout the history of society, there's always been people who've stood up and said like, okay, there's an injustice here and enough's enough. And my fear is if all of us walk away, and some of us need to, dang it, some of us need to. And you're right. Like I'm feeling it. Like the last month, my body says like something is not right and you can't keep doing this. But on some level, like somebody has to point it out. Somebody has to say there's a problem here. And man, I'm telling you, it's zero effective from the outside because they can just paint you as an other and you no longer have a voice.
But they paint you as another from the inside too.
Sure. But you at least
anytime you give that contradictory message, you have painted yourself as an other because they program that into you at such a young age that if you hear people talking about this or this or this or this, you know they're on the wrong path and start to discount them. So you're already kind of like separating yourself from the group, whether you know it or not.
Oh, I know it.
I mean, you're feeling it.
Yeah, and not just that, I know it. I know when I make a comment in class,
right.
I'm sucking the wind out of the room. Yeah. I realize that there are people in that room that go, man, I just wish Bill would shut up. And I understand that for many of them, they go home and they probably think like, Bill's just crazy. But I'm also telling you that there are people in that room who come up after class and put their arm around me and say, I've got a gay nephew and I couldn't have said that. Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, Bill, I mean, I taught gospel doctrine for 4 years as a non-believer. The only reason I did it is because I felt like I could do exactly what you're doing, you know, and what you're talking about. I can be that influence and be that voice for people and you articulated it much better than I did, which is not let other people tell your story. I liked it. That was a good hook. It was rhetorically very good, but it's unfortunately it's bullshit. Because they do tell your story, and the amount of influence and the amount of impact that you can have because of either your station, your status, because you were even saying fringy things yourself, cannot overcome how effective they are at telling other people's stories. It is hopeless. It is futile. It really, really is. And so I think, you know, your cause is just, but you're chasing, you know, you're chasing windmills.
Right.
Someone's listening to Moana.
It's not me.
What? Oh yeah, someone in my turn the door.
And I'll tell you too, up until a month ago, again, up until my body beginning to react this way, I would have told you like Mormonism with all its messiness, and again, we can get into truth claims and all that if you want to, but with all its messiness, like it was still a playground for me to develop and grow. It's, again, only in this last month that my body is saying like, enough's enough. I can't do this forever. And so I'm fully on board with you. Like if you're traumatized, get out. If Mormonism isn't healthy to you or your family, get out. But when I joined Mormonism as a 17-year-old, it was a good thing for me. And it was the same Mormonism. And it was a good thing for me. And at some point it became maybe a net slight positive. And at some point it became a net slight negative. And in the last month, it's become much more of a negative. But we all have to kind of make decisions like, is it positive? Am I growing? Am I becoming something? Is Mormonism still having a positive effect in my life? For some of us, the answer is so far no, like get out. But I also don't want to discredit those who still find this playground to still be beneficial on some level. And I know that may sound crazy, but again, from 17 to 25, this same Mormonism was gorgeous for me. And it picked me up off a bad path and put me on a good one. And at what point do we decide like, ooh, now it's just harmful. Now it's just bad. And now I just need to get out of here. And maybe you're in that space, and maybe I'm even in that space now, but I want to grant that not everybody's right there.
No, I think
agree with that.
I think you've hit the wall. You're starting to bang your head against the wall. After you keep banging your head against the wall for a while, then you'll be like, I just got to get over the wall. That's my prediction. But I'm still rooting for you.
Sure. Do we all need that though, Glenn? Do we all need to kind of hit the wall on our own? And if we leave too soon,
not everybody hits the wall though. I mean,
sure.
not everybody that's in the church goes in that direction. I mean, most people don't.
Right.
You know, there's some people that are driven by the kinds of things that you've been driven by to learn things, to really know it. I want to know this stuff. And then you start to see the messy things that they didn't want you to see. And then you start to see all the discrepancies and hear all these things, and you can't just let it go. You know, like for a while, you were able to let the things go that didn't work and focus on the things that do work. But like right now, what it sounds like to me is where you are, you've hit that wall, you're banging your head against the wall, and you're like, I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can. And hopefully make a difference with it. And like I said, I'm rooting for you.
Yeah. And there are still positives here. So the calling I serve right now, I love it. I'm a ward finance clerk, and I'm counting the church's tithing, right? Which you think would just tick me off and make me angry. And yet I'm going on these drives with a member of the bishopric, and we're driving to the bank, and we're having these beautiful conversations. And there are still times in church where something is talked about, and I still feel like, ooh, that was still a positive thing for me at that moment to hear that and to think about that and to ponder on that. Like, I just think we have to like make space for church to still be positive and negative for a lot of people. And for as many people as the positive perhaps either outweighs the negative, or it's close enough that they still see value or worth in staying here. Like I see the benefit of having more voices who help them to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, and God, but you're not. There aren't voices. You keep acting as if this is a movement. It's not. You're a voice of one, and I think you provide a false perception that is an option. That's my problem. I guess the more I think about it, I think you have a responsibility if you feel that way, and if you are butting against that, you have a responsibility to other people to leave.
Yeah.
You have a responsibility to. You have bought into the program by saying, I'm going to stay and I'm going to be active. I'm going to follow their program. I think there's another answer. This is where, and this is my approach to things. I think we have the same goals as far as wanting to have a voice for other people and see that there's another way. For me, the other way isn't in staying. It is continuing to engage with my ward family by being in their spaces as me, being in their space as Matt, leaving the church, but yet, my family's productive and we're involved in the community and we still talk to our friends, and we're not bitter or mean or angry. It's that's who we are, and that's what we are. And I think that I hope that causes people to think a little bit more and and wonder, well, Matt and his family, Kristen, they're still so nice and they're still doing these things and their kids are thriving and they're not in the church. That will hopefully plant those seeds and have more impact than if I were to to stand up and challenge something that I disagreed with when I heard that I heard. You're following it. I guess my quarrel with you is that all you're doing is just a shade left or whatever of really following the church's program of what they're telling you. This is the way to behave. And the more that people fall into that trap, it's a trap set by the church.
Right.
So I don't think you're actually doing your own thing. I think you're doing the church's thing. And this is part of that trauma that causes you to want to go down that path. And yeah, everybody has to find their own way and has to make that decision on their own. And so it's kind of silly of me to say, yeah, Bill, you need to do it this way. Bill, this is what you need to do. And I'm just I'm telling you, man, if you are feeling that, don't delay it, and don't delay it for your family members and your kids and all this. And it's real presumptive of me to actually to pretend I have any insight into what's going on with your family or your kids, because maybe I don't. But
the Spirit is moving you to.
It's moving to tell.
Right.
I guess it's difficult for me. I feel like I'm like kind of want to pat you on the head a little bit, Bill, and I apologize for being for feeling as condescending as I do towards you. But that's how I feel, because it's part of me. I feel like, yeah, this is the same freaking conversation that we've had with hundreds and hundreds of people. And I know how this ends, and I know how this ends for other people. And it is hard for me to say, yeah, hey, rooting for you, because I think that's also a little condescending, because nobody really believes that it's likely. And if it's possible for you,
so now you're coming at me.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh. Blessed be the exception, I think Spencer W. Kimple said. And that's really what we're talking about. If you can do it, man, blessed be the exception, but know that you're the exception. And I think portraying it as if it's anything but an absolute exception does other people that you might influence a disservice. That's what I'm concerned. And I know I've probably said it 3 different times. And if anything, your reaction and what I'm hearing from you only enrages me about the church and the number that they've done on you, and that they have sold you that this is that's an option, given everything you said. And the LGBT issues are always in the back of my mind right here, as I heard you bring that up at the beginning, because there is no tenable situation where somebody who has at some point identified as being by being in the LGBTQIA community, that there is any scenario where being in the church and staying in the church is going to be beneficial to them. I've yet to see that person, even anecdotally. Because you can't look at 2 years or 3 years and say, well, this kid's 18, he's 20, he's 21, he's 25. We don't know what the when that's going to hit. When they may seem healthy right now, may seem like it's working for them, and then in 5 years, who is going to be there when there's a crash? Not you. Not you in 10 years, man. Not me. Not John DeLynn, and not the Mama Dragons. Those kids will fend for themselves in 10 years. And we will have provided them a false reality as to what's best for them. I say that without hesitation. Sure. I'm not going to say, well, but in some sense, no. There's not a scenario where I see that ending positively for those kids. Not one.
And I hope you don't misconstrue my thoughts as I'm a supporter of LGBT kids staying in a church when it's unhealthy. Like, I'm not. I'm with you. There's no 40-year-old homosexual in the church living the church's paradigm who isn't carrying some real heavy burden with them. Like, I get it. Like, I'm all for that. And I'm trying to choose my words carefully, because I'm on the inside and I want to be on the inside and I'm trying to stay. And at some point I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I'm going to do the wrong thing. And I don't even get a chance to decide whether I stay or go, right? They'll decide for me. But I'm saying, like, if it's unhealthy and it's unhealthy for that segment almost, if not entirely, then I value and validate and honor people walking away from the institution if that's the case.
In what scenario? You said a qualifier. If it's unhealthy, I'm saying you can take that away, because if there's somebody in the LGBT community and they're in the church, it's unhealthy.
Right.
There's no scenario where it's not. That's my premise, and I don't know that we part on that, but I wanted to just, I've been watching sessions all day today, and there was always these little qualifiers that I wanted to jump on and say, whoa, what does that mean? And that's one of them, right? It's easy to say LGBT, and it's unhealthy, then you should leave. Well, that applies to probably anyway. I'm going a little further and saying, if this plus this, then unhealthy. And so I guess I could be convinced otherwise, but this is an area so uncomfortable because he hates when we're not nicer to guests.
I like this. We're good.
No. I'm not uncomfortable with it. Tom. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with Tom. But I keep thinking, and I can't remember their names, but I've heard podcasts many years ago. It's been a while, with gay Mormons who are faithful and making it work, and I'm uncomfortable in my ignorance of their actual lived experience to tell them that they're unhealthy. And I feel like that's almost the same type of abuse that Bill's talking about, where we're telling them what they are. We're co-opting their story instead of hearing them tell us themselves. And so I'm going to suspend my judgment on how healthy it is or not, just because I'm ignorant in that area. I don't know. But I would want to hear from them and hear their experience. And and not just prejudge that whatever they're going to tell me is justifying bullshit because they're fooling themselves. I want to listen and know what it is, because I'm not as confident, Matt, as you are there.
And I hope that makes sense when I say the qualifier of if it's unhealthy for 100% of them, then 100% of them should get out. If it's unhealthy for 99%, then 99% get out. But cool. But like you're saying, Glenn, I don't want to, I'm having an argument with the church because they're telling my story, and I want to be careful that I'm not telling someone else's story. Like, I would be doing the exact same disservice to them and not letting them have that, right? If I say like you're telling me you're happy, but you're not really happy. You're telling me that you're having a positive experience in the church, but you're not really having a positive experience in the church, and you should get out. Like, I simply want to take a step back and say, like, it would be wrong of me to tell their story in the same way that I don't want the church telling mine.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Sorry, it sounds good, but I hear what you're saying.
I'm guessing you don't buy it, Matt.
No, if somebody tells me, no, look, Matt, I'm 34 years old, and I'm in the church, and I acknowledge I'm gay, and I've decided I'm going to be celibate, and it works for me. I'm supposed to say, yeah, totally. That makes so much sense. You should be celibate, and you're not entitled to have a relationship and to have a family. So yeah, that is choosing. I'm not gonna do that, because they have, again, adopted a program that I think is demonstrably false in some instances, but in that instance, and it's in a very narrow look. If you are kind of a middle class, without mental or physical disabilities, and kind of have a family that has no real major problems, I think the church can be really can work for those people. I'm not saying in every situation people should leave, but there are just certain characteristics or certain things that are incompatible with the church as currently constituted. And to say 100% needs to be that, it doesn't need to be 100% to still be true, right? There is enough. There's enough sample to say that the exception is not worth the rank and file, or the vast majority, and even more than majority of cases where there will be pain, trauma, and a net negative. However, you measure that. Depressing, I know, and I just feel like a salty bastard here. But this is why I feel so.
No, the moral of the story is we shouldn't record an episode after Matt Long watches a bunch of Sessions stuff on CNN.
I'm with you.
It's how detached I am from it's how detached I am from Mormonism, because I have a tough time. I mean, it really is. It's hard to be empathetic now.
Well, if you're getting pulled back into this stuff and trauma that you thought you'd left behind, and you're feeling that again, is that what's happening? You're like getting pissed off because you're remembering what that felt like?
I'm definitely am tapping into it, and now I'm angry at other people at other people who are dealing with it as well. I feel like I'm more and more removed from it, and I hear, so I guess I don't think I finished before. After I listened to Bill, I was so compelled. It was so compelling, and it helped me tap into that to what I was experiencing. But then there was this reaction of, but how much of this is self-imposed? How much of this is you hitting your hand with the hammer again and again and again and again? At some point, there's only so much that I can blame as, oh my gosh, that's too bad. I hope you feel better. And then at some point, it's, yeah, dude, stop hitting your hand in the hammer with the hammer. This is your fault. And that was the next reaction I had as I was listening to your story, Bill, is at some point I don't have as much empathy for someone like you experiencing that when you're choosing to go through it. And at some point, it's not the church's fault if people like you choose to go through it. At some point, you've got to take responsibility for not mitigating the damage that's, if there is damage, that's being caused.
Right. I hear that. And I don't even know what, there's so many things running through my head. One of them is and I think you point to this, when we let the church or somebody in the church hold up their life as an example. So what are some of these, some of the famous LGBT people in the church making it work? The one name is slipping my mind. But to hold himself up and say, I'm doing it so the rest of you can do it, I just don't think that's fair. If 99% of the people can't make it work and 1% can, I think the data says this is really tough, and we shouldn't all try to look like that 1% and just make a square peg fit into a round hole. If it's hurting that bad, just get out. I'm with that. I want to be careful. I don't want to tell that to say it's 100% or it's 99 or it's 98 or I want to hesitate to stop shy of telling someone's story, because I'm saying that for me, when somebody does that to me, it feels wrong. Does that make sense? I don't want to.
100%. And I'll give you an example. 7 years ago, a long time ago, I had a long conversation with Micah Nicolaisen, and he was talking about, middle way Mormon, thoughtful faith, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I just kind of laughed at him. I said, "Yeah, dude, we'll see where you're at in a year." And he said, "Well, that's a real jerky thing to say. People always say that, and I can make it work." And I just think you're, kind of basically lectured me the way what you're saying, and I think it was legitimate. It did cause me pause. I said, "You know what? You're right. I shouldn't have said that." And 8 months later, he's even further than I am. Right. So I guess at some point I can only be right so many times without saying,
oh, man, come on.
Yeah, I'm right. I really know what I'm talking about.
I hate it when I'm right, but it's all the time.
So I have come back on that. No, you're right. That's a good point. It's a good point. Until at some point I've just got to say, you know what? It's not a good point.
Yeah.
It sounds good. But it's not. and saying that the church being unhealthy for this segment of the this community is different than saying Exmos are this. It's not the same as the church telling their story. So I reject that saying, yeah, I think that's unhealthy, is saying, yeah, you may say you're healthy, you may say you like the church, but you're not. That's the same way as telling this, telling an Exmo story of the reason why we're leaving is because we're lazy, or we want to sin, or we just like alcohol too much, or we're deceived, and those things, because that's the message. What I'm saying is, you are good enough the way you are. People who that identify in whatever the way they do. And my language is horrible. I get it. I feel like Patton Oswalt not using the right language. That it's different than me saying, I'm saying you are entitled to a relationship. You are entitled to love. You are entitled to love who you want to love, and not doing that is unhealthy. I don't think that's telling their story. I think that's saying maybe there's a healthier way, and quit falling into the church. I just feel like I'm going to be done for a while. So
okay, all right, okay.
I'm angry though, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm angry at you. I'm really angry at you, quite frankly, because I do think, it's this. Again, I go back 10 years to John Dehlin, and I go back 10 years. Oh, we're gonna do this. You're gonna stay. And the shit that you're saying has been said, and it's been said by John over and over and over again. And I think it's contributed to the trauma of this ex-Mormon community. So now, as more people in the church hear this and think it's just going to provide more, yeah, let's stay in. This is an option as well. When it's just fucking not. For most the people who are going to have access to you, the people who are going to listen to you, don't need to hear that. Their spouses don't need to hear that. The mixed faith marriages don't need to hear that. What they need to hear is, go talk to your spouse. Go deal with real marital counseling. It's not about the church. It's not about religion. It's about something deeper. And that's my problem. I see you as John Dehlin 2.0, a thoughtful faith 2.0. The other thing whatever.
Stay
else.
LDS.
Stay LDS 2.0. And I've seen what that does to people. I've seen the way it causes people to stay in the church or stay in ex-Mormonism or try to do the middle way. That's what it facilitates, and that's what it fosters. And to the one person that might help, and it might be beneficial to, it's going to cause more damage to 100 people. So what I'm trying to persuade you, Bill, is to knock it off. It's not helpful. And the fact that you came to this realization later than most of us did, and that you're going through it now, what I'm not going to do is stand here and say, yeah, that's a viable option as well, and you should listen. No, it's already happened. We've already done this over and over and over again. I feel like we're in Groundhog Day by listening to, by hearing what you're saying. And what you're saying isn't really unique, and it isn't new. It's been said over and over and over again in all these Nomish. That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm back in Nom, back in 2007. And so I'm asking you to consider not going down the path that you're heading, Bill.
So something about that movie Groundhog Day?
Yeah.
He did start changing from day to day, even though it repeated himself. And it took him a while before he got to the end and that repetition stopped. And so I think you're being way too hard on Bill and other people that are in different stages of
than I am.
Yeah, than you are right now, and they're not ready. They haven't learned how to play that piano concerto like Bill Murray did in Groundhog Day. They've still got to practice. They've still got to learn that. And this is condescending, because I'm like speaking from a privileged position as if leaving is the right thing to do. And I think it is. I know it definitely is for me, but I don't feel comfortable saying that about everybody else, and so like give them the space, let them progress where they're going to progress, in the speed that they're going to progress, and like the things that you're so passionate about with the trauma that they're experiencing. Yeah, that but having somebody that's there to help them, I don't know that that's such a bad thing. But I don't know, keeping them in anyway. I just think people are in different stages of progression, and that should be respected.
And I should add, when I was 32 years old and my shelf fell down and I was just crashing, like that was miserable. I felt like completely alone and nobody to talk to, nobody in my ward who could have these conversations, nobody who could put their arm around me and say like, ooh, we're going to figure this way out. Like I see people crash in 2 weeks. And for some of them, again, I'm not saying for everybody, but for some of them, that's not easy and it's painful and it's hard. I think there still is some value in saying like, there are people in different places on this journey and some of them need that middle way voice to kind of soften the landing.
Even if it's just a temporary.
Even if it's only temporary.
Even if it's 6 months
or a year.
No, they don't. That's where I'm at. I keep hearing that. No, they don't.
Yeah.
Because we haven't done the alternative. Why?
I wish there would have been a voice. When I was 32, I wish there would have been a voice. I wish somebody would have said like, let me help you slow this down. Let me help you process this. Let me help you at least see for a temporary way how to just reconcile and give yourself some safe space.
I know, but you're not the guy to do that. These these counterfeit therapists aren't the ones to do that. These other people like me who think they figured it out. I'm saying the people that have the middle way voice, they're not the people to help people. If these people are going through it, this is what I'm rejecting, I guess, is we've all become these amateur, therapists and life coaches by trying to help people in this transition because somebody has kind of gone through it before. But yeah, we haven't gone through the same thing other people have gone. We don't have the same circumstance. We have no concept of what they're actually dealing with. So all we have to provide is kind of our own experience and our own perception of what things are like.
Insight du jour.
Yeah,
right?
Insight du jour. So again, so I agree with the principle that these people need somebody to talk to and somebody to kind of process this stuff through, but not what they have. What they need is they need some form of bona fide counselor doesn't have to do with religion. We have created this voodoo, this kind of faith transition. It's the most unique and it's the most traumatic thing. There's trauma there. It's not unique. It's trauma manifested differently. And that's sorry. I have like 4 points that I said 12 different times.
But you're talking about it's humans that are abusing other humans, whether it's in the name of religion or it's some other thing. Is that what you're saying?
That's a better way to put it.
Okay. And
so they need other people to do what? And who are these people? And what advice are they providing? And this is where I think the cure or the supposed cure it may be worse than the sickness or maybe just as bad.
I don't know. You're being real dismissive, man. Like what if Bill's just offering just a shoulder and a listening ear like a good friend would? Yeah, maybe he's not a therapist or a life coach or whatever, but I don't know why you're saying that, his value or what he could add at least to people just being there to listen, or even, what his experience and what he provides for people actually is beneficial to them. But I don't know, man.
Yeah.
How's this dead horse doing?
I know. So can I hurry and ask my one question,
please,
while Matt's eating, I guess, distracted. So,
ask it from McDonald's.
Okay. So I did want to ask, because this is kind of related to Matt's little tirade there. After all this that you've gone through, knowing pretty much all the problematic areas, going through apologetics in and out, whatever, and now you're where you're at, experiencing some difficult issues where people speak for you or trying to tell your narrative or your story. what exactly at this point do you foresee that could actually pull you out of the church? Is there anything at all? Or do you foresee a time where you're like, okay, once that bridge gets burned, then I'm out? Or if this thing comes up, then I'm out? Is there anything that you foresee, or do you feel like that you really are like feet planted in, you're in for the long haul sort of thing?
It's a great question, because the last month has been so fluid in this conversation. I've sat down with people that I respect and consider friends in my life, and we've had these conversations about, where am I at in a year? Where am I at in 2 years? Where am I at in 5 years? I'll say several things. One is that I don't have complete control over that, right? I mean, the church could decide tomorrow that I said too much on infants on thrones, and we've already had at times conversations with my church leaders where folks higher up are aware of the things that I'm saying, and they find those things to be really, really uncomfortable. And so all it takes is somebody higher up to say enough's enough. And we know how that works, right? I walk into a room, I get 45 minutes to talk, and they tell me I'm excommunicated. So we already know how the game ends if somebody decides to go that route, right? But the other side of it is, like, if that doesn't happen, do I stay? And I'll simply say, as long as I see Mormonism having a positive to my own growth, as long as I see Mormonism providing, I always want to call it a playground, but this place to like see human development and to watch how that happens within myself and with others, like I see that as a positive. It's something I find to be really interesting and cool. If there's ever a time the church like essentially made me a second-class member by not allowing me to talk, not allowing me to pray, not allowing me to participate in the tribe, then it would seem silly to sit in the back row and have everybody already think of you as something less than, and just put yourself up for that week in and week out. But like I still love church. I still love the experience. And part of it also has to do with my family. Like my kids, on some level, almost every one of them disconnected. They all see that this is not something that they're going to continue doing as an adult. And if I see the trauma, if I see my children experiencing trauma, then that becomes a whole nother game. They already see it happening to others. I don't know that they've experienced it firsthand themselves. And if that were the case and we're seeing that go on, then I think that just changes the game completely.
How old are your kids?
So I've got an 18-year-old who just graduated from high school. He's off on his own.
Mission age.
I've got a 16-year-old, but he's, again, disconnected from the church.
Yeah.
I've got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old that it is the normal teenage battle to get them to go to church.
Those are all boys?
No, my oldest and my youngest are boys. My two middle ones are girls. So I've got an 11-year-old boy. I've got a 14-year-old girl and a 16-year-old girl and an 18-year-old boy.
Does the patriarchy and the built-in misogyny, does that not concern you with the girls, or are they disconnected enough where you say, that's just not going to permeate?
Yeah, if I were a betting man, I would think that all four of my kids will not be active as adults.
And that was something with my kids that was kind of an advantage, that they were able to see the misogyny and kind of come to their own conclusions about what it meant. So, even though they continue to attend occasionally because of their mother, that, they've got enough where they've got that separation from, but it's the awareness that helps them there.
We've taught our kids for the last decade, like, to ask tough questions, to be critical thinkers, to not just accept something because it's said. And so my kids have done a really good job of kind of holding their ground on those kinds of things. My 11-year-old still finds church interesting and still finds there to be quite a bit of a positive benefit for him. But again, I'm open to, at any moment, that falling apart. And my wife and I have had conversations that if one of our kids came out and said, and our kids know where we stand on the LGBT issue, but if one of our kids came out and said we're LGBT, like, I would just say, like, I'm gone. But the best thing to do is get my kid out of here. And to protect them from not having to deal with all that comes with being LGBT and inside the church. But as of right now, I don't have that situation. And the church isn't this huge negative on any one of my family members, and each one of them on their own schedule, their own trajectory, are disconnecting from it. I'm probably the one who's fighting the most for us to go. I'm the one who's the most excited to get up on Sunday morning and throw my rainbow tie on and go to church. So you get back to what you said. Do I stay? Do I go? How long am I in? I don't know. Like I'm still having a little bit of fun here, but at the same time, again, the last month, my body is telling me you can't do this much longer.
So if you were to have like multiple occurrences like that in a row, like 3 months or 90 days of boom, 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 you might be like, all right, that's it. I'm out.
Right. I'm with you. If it's physically unhealthy, if I'm going to have a heart attack in the next 10 years and I can see that coming, like what's the use? What's the sense?
Yeah, I would
it makes
hope
no sense to stick yourself in that.
Yeah, I would hope for your family's sake that you'd at least get out of that.
Right. Right. But again, I've got a good group of friends here in Southern Utah that are like-minded and realize exactly how messy this thing is. And there's some amount of good times and enjoyment that we get by still interacting with this faith. I still have spiritual experiences. I still have, on some level, I still find the church true and living, although not anywhere near what the average member would call that or define that or frame that. And they would probably think of me as a heretic to even begin to explain it.
Do you have a recommend?
Yeah, I've got a Temple Recommend. I have a calling as the ward finance clerk, which you have to be a Temple Recommend holding member to have that calling. I go every Sunday. Some Sundays I throw my white shirt on, but most Sundays I'm wearing my colored shirt. Throw my rainbow tie and my little rainbow lapel on, and I head off. And yeah, I like going.
What do you think?
All right. Anything you want to say in closing, Bill? I know we've talked about a lot, and I don't want to make Matt angry again. I really don't.
Get him all triggered and outraged.
No.
Trying to think offhand. Yeah. I mean, obviously and Matt, again, I like totally respect where you're coming from. It was kind of a long segment, so it kind of, for me, kind of hurts the overall of what we're kind of trying to hit on or discuss or kind of cover. But I feel like what you said was real, and it's an absolute valid perspective. And for so many people, Mormonism is deeply, deeply, deeply unhealthy. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we say like everybody should stay in and make the best of it because there's something good here. I just don't buy that. Like if it's that unhealthy, like get away. But again, I think for many, the church is still useful. It still promotes growth. It still helps them to become sensitive to those who are picked on or those on the margins. And I think when you completely withdraw yourself from any of those kinds of challenges, like you also lose something too.
This is the point where we are supposed to say amen. No.
Yeah, or that's a wrap.
What do you think you lose by withdrawing completely? And that might be where one of the places where you and I part company.
Right. I still find a lot of value in the community. I still find a lot of value in the friendships. And yes, some of them are very surface level, right? Like you don't realize it till you kind of do open your eyes, but a lot of Mormonism is set up to kind of give you these surface relationships that as long as you fit the mold, like you're their friend and you're liked, but the moment you're different than them, you're no longer their friend and you're no longer liked. But I also find that there are some relationships within this community that are valuable. They have meaning to me. They're friends that I think do go deeper than just our faith.
So do you think you would not have those relationships or that access to that community if you weren't in that? That's what I hear you saying. And if that's the case, then what type of community do you really have? Again, you're following their program. You have that access as long as you follow their program. So I think you're making my argument for me.
So you would argue then that there's nothing unique to the community of Mormonism that you can't find outside of there?
Well, that's a different question. I'm not saying it's not unique. I'm saying What is unique is not good. What is good is not unique.
I would push back and I would say, like, within a group like Mormonism, and again, I totally understand some of it is surfacey, but you do have access to people who can be helpful to you at times when you're having a hard time, right?
Right.
Whether we're talking casseroles or someone helping you move, and all the again, the somewhat of the mundane stuff that just naturally happens in Mormonism in a member trying to just be a good member.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I walk away from that, like, I feel like I lose something. And I'm not naive enough to say, like, if I walk away, what does that look like? I'm not one that says, oh, I got to stay. My whole life will fall down the drain if I leave the church. I don't believe that at all. Like, I'm perfectly comfortable when the time comes. Like, if I'm out of the church, so be it. I'll find other good things to do to occupy my time. You pointed to several of those earlier. I'm completely comfortable with that. I just think that if you leave Mormonism, you lose something too. And that loss of something may be bigger or lesser than the things you gain, but it's at least worth taking the time to think about, because I do think you do lose something.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. There's a built-in community. There's a conditional community. So to the extent that conditional friends are valuable, Mormonism, that community has some value, but they're conditional. And they're conditional and very one-sided. They say these are those conditions. So I don't disagree that community exists. I'm not sure. Again, I think you're making my points for me, and advancing my argument by pointing out some of those things. So I don't know. I do have a community here. Now, again, I am a different personality. I have different makeup. I mean, I have that privilege to be able to, to be married to somebody who makes friends easily. So that makes it easier, and if people don't have that, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be alone. And if that was the option, being lonely and not having that versus that, I'd probably take it. So,
but even to go a step further, I have, again, like-minded friends who we do not value our friendship based on our activity in the church,
mm-hmm.
but it is by being a member of the church and staying involved in the conversation of Mormonism. Like, it's what I love. I love Mormon history. I love Mormon theology. I love having conversations around this faith. And so some of the friendships I have, like, they feel the same way. And so being active in the church, it's not like my friendship only goes that deep, but it is this thing that connects us. It's this thing that gives us a chance to talk and to have conversations. And that's what we like. And again, I'm still having spiritual experiences in church. I still find value spiritually in being there. I've thought about, like, what would I do if I left the church? And again, I respect other people making decisions on how they're going to spend their time, and whatever they decide is valid, I honor it for them. For me, I'd sit around in my underwear and play Madden 17, and by the 7th Sunday, I'd be just, like, bored to death. I'm not the kind of guy who's just going to go out and, like, do things on my own. And so for me, having that structure is important. And I've thought, like, okay, maybe I can go to another church because I still hold value in the scriptural Jesus. And so do I go to another church? Well, they still have the same dysfunction, maybe on a different level, but there's so many things missing in those faiths as well. No matter where I go, like, it's going to be a conundrum. It's going to be something that's going to, like, not be the perfect fitting place for me, right? Like, in a perfect world, you take Mormonism and you just take out all the unhealthy parts, but that's never going to happen. And so Mormonism with its unhealthy parts is still the best thing I've got. Like, this is still something that's significant to me.
Yeah, we'll see what you're like until you. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm off the record, man. Let's talk about that. Like,
no, you're too nice of a guy. You're too articulate. I mean, everything that I hear says You don't need the church. I can't wait to see how healthy and happy you are in a few years.
I love your anecdotal story. Like, oh yeah, well, I talked to Micah, and now he's like farther than I am. So proof positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike is gonna love that too.
I know.
He will. I tell the story all the time.
Yeah.
He's the one that caused me to temper myself. I don't know.
Thoughtful faith.
Like
how about thoughtful apostate? Yeah,
that's right. I'm a salty bastard. That's what
I'd say.
That's what I've become.
Lord.
I've become but you know what? I can only speak my truth. I'm going to speak my truth.
And amen to your truth.
Sorry, dude, I really hate that.
Amen to the truth of that man.
Yeah, the truth. Amen to the truth.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Bill.
Awesome. Thanks for the chance.
Are you going to Sunstone?
I am. I'm presenting a session there on Joseph Smith's treasure digging, titled Seer Stones, Treasure Digging in Alvin's Hand.
Cool.
I'm going to just sit in the back and yell, boo! No, I'm just...
that sounds interesting.
Sweet. Well, we'll see you there then.
Awesome. I look forward to it, guys.
Cool.
Think the world of all you guys and in the work you guys do.
Yeah, ditto. And again, I'm still rooting for you.
Awesome.
But I wouldn't put any money on it.
I hear you. Let's check back in 12 months.
I did. I really enjoyed your podcast, Bill. Very honest and heartfelt. And if nothing else, I appreciate genuineness, and you certainly have that, and I very much value and appreciate that. And I do want to validate what you're saying, even if I disagree with you. I think that's what we're supposed to do, right? Validate, even though we. No, but really, I did very much appreciate the honesty of your podcast.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we could get to a place as a community where people like you and me can disagree with each other and still let each other tell our story?
Well, I think we're there.
You and I are.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, well, we got about 15 million more to go.
Something incredible.
Oh, gosh, you want to help? Oh, that's not going to happen. That's.
I hear you.
Lindsay Park will bridge the gap. I don't know. That's who I'm relying on.
So there is more than one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom's pretty good at it too.
Okay.
Yeah, you haven't gotten quite as salty towards me. What's up with that?
Oh, you're such a handsome man. You got this nice camera. You look like you just have porcelain skin. It's beautiful.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Okay, have a great night, guys.
See you, Bill.
Darling, you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
Hey there, infant listeners. So what do you think? Was Matt too hard on Bill in this episode? Do you wish you could hear Matt talk about that a little bit more? Well, guess what? We actually did a follow-up discussion just for our Patreon subscribers. So join us over on Patreon if you want to hear that. Plus, get access to episodes like the one that you heard today a week earlier than the general public. You'll also get access to video versions of these discussions, along with a quick video welcome from Brother Jake, or should I say, Father Jake, and his new baby boy, who he may or may not be auctioning off to the highest bidder. We've also thrown some videos from our mission days up there. We have some old episodes that we recorded but never released. We're going to put those up there. There's a lot of material that will be on Patreon that won't be available anywhere else. So, we're trying to balance this thing where listeners will never be required to pay for anything if they don't want to. But for those who do want to, they'll not only get the infant episodes that you've come to know and love, but will also get an enhanced experience that you can't get anywhere else. Like next Sunday, July 2nd, 2017, we'll be holding our first ever live interactive online recording. We're calling it Fast and Testimony Hangout or something like that. First Sunday of every month, we're going to start doing that. And it's something that only our Patreon subscribers will have access to. So if that sort of thing sounds worth the price of a cup of coffee to you, please check out our Patreon page and become a patron of Infants on Thrones today. Thank you.
Pretty bird, pretty bird.
Hey, this is Billy in 4C from Rhode Island. Yes, that's right. The blind kid from Dumb and Dumber, and now Dumb and Dumber 2, too. Yes, a pseudo-celebrity Mormon. Infants on Thrones has helped me come to grips with the tragedy that I've seen. Well, heard about at least, when learning that the thing that mattered most to me ended up being dead all along. I mean, Petey didn't even have a head. If you heart the show as much as I do, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes, write a short review, and oh my heck, why not post about it on the social media? Unless you're still stuck in the Relief Society closet about your faith transition stuff like I am. And always remember, I just thought he was real quiet. Anyone for the closing prayer?
If I go, there will be trouble. And if I stay, it will be double. So you gotta let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.